Hello, my name is Shanda Blackmon, and I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon at Mayo Clinic. I focus on complex reconstruction of the esophagus and minimally invasive surgery, removing tumors within the chest on days when I'm operating. I focus on digital enhancement of patient-centered healthcare on days when I'm not operating or not in the clinic seeing patients. I've been practicing cardiothoracic surgery for 17 years. My talk is entitled Pearls in the Operating Room, not just because I wear my pearls when I operate, but to tell you why I wear these pearls. A long time ago, it was extremely rare to be a woman in surgery. I looked for other women to connect to. Although I have mostly been mentored by men throughout my entire career, I did find a woman who inspired me. Her name is Nancy Perrier. Nancy is an endocrine surgeon from Mayo Clinic who practices at MD Anderson, where I serendipitously ended up doing some of my training. In her 2002 publication, she talks about how her trademarks, lipsticks and pearls and lipstick, have become part of who she is. Her patients enjoy using that as an immediate way to know her and connect with her. She initially used these tools to hide the exhaustion and sleepless nights of a resident surgeon. She discussed the reactions of her colleagues and how women are viewed differently than men. Especially back then, she was keenly aware of these differences. Her lipstick and pearls are indeed a sign of careful attention to every detail, a demonstration of meticulous perfection in her work, with her even mentioning, "Isn't it the detail-oriented technician, the one you want exploring your neck or removing your cancer?" Retaining identity in medicine and surgery is important for everyone, no matter how you see yourself. So at the beginning of this talk, I will tell you a brief story about who I am and how I see myself. We tell people about ourselves, give the elevator pitch, tell our patients, explain to people at cocktail parties and on social media, and tell our stories even in our NIH biosketches. I had an unusual career pathway because I failed early in my career. I wanted to be an artist. I worked in an art gallery, painted, and sold most of my paintings to my mother, who begrudgingly bought many of them just so I could pay rent. When she ran out of wall space, I decided it was time to find another career. My motivation grew as I starved and ran out of money to live and decided that I would explore healthcare. I went to medical school to be a pediatrician, changed my mind, and chose surgery to do trauma and minimally invasive surgery until one fateful night when I took care of a woman who also happened to have twins and was in a car accident, fracturing her sternum. The steering wheel jammed into her chest, all the great vessels coming off of her aorta were torn, and we put her on the heart-lung bypass machine, drained all the blood out into the pump, cooled her down to 18 degrees Celsius, packed her head in ice, and then turned the pump off. This is what's called circulatory arrest. With a cold, non-circulating, basically dead patient on the table, we had about 20 minutes to rapidly replace and rebuild all those great vessels and then slowly turn the pump back on and rewarm her. She went home 4 days later. After struggling with infertility, thinking I couldn't have children, and a heavy desire to find a career with a lot of adrenaline and challenge, I chose to go into cardiothoracic surgery. Aside from being the first woman to graduate from my general surgery program, I also became the first woman to have twins, or any baby for that matter, in my cardiothoracic surgery program at Baylor in Houston. Once I finished my cardiac surgery training, I fell in love with cancer patients and went over to MD Anderson to do a super fellowship to learn how to rebuild the esophagus out of small bowel, sort of an auto transplant. I then became one of the youngest and first female chiefs of thoracic surgery at Houston Methodist Hospital in Texas. Overwhelmed with the burden of my practice and having a desire to care for my patients, I started a support group and saw my patients and their caregivers together in one room once a month. We learned from one another about what these patients struggle with after the surgery. Sometimes I remembered this was nothing I was really taught in formal medical training. I used that experience to build a questionnaire to assess the symptoms, something we now call patient-reported outcomes. I was recruited 8 years later to come to Mayo Clinic and become the first female cardiothoracic surgeon on staff. There, I built a lab, an app, to digitally score and manage patient symptoms and remained a very busy surgeon. I became involved in the Center for Digital Health and became a part of the amazing digital transformation at Mayo Clinic, revolutionizing the way we care for patients in every way. I faced a lot of challenges. Life has not been easy. The obstacles and hardships presented challenges that I had to respond to. I will refer to these inciting events as grit. At the center of every pearl is a piece of grit. The grit at the center of a pearl can represent that moment when you decided who you are or who you wanted to be. It can represent the hardship you had to endure to get to that place where you became inspired. For me, it was failing early as an artist, being hungry and poor. Because my parents let me suffer a bit, I became internally motivated. Often, the grit is painful, uncomfortable, and might create wounds. The grit is important, but like the resilient people we are, we build our story and respond to that grit in our own way. Each layer on top of that grit is how we build the pearl. The stories we tell ourselves and how we move past the grit is what defines us, not the grit. The grading of pearls should be the way we grade humans. Luster, defined by bright, highly reflective pearls, get the higher rating. Those who bring light into the room should be especially valued. Surface clarity. Surface blemishes are rated by their size, number, type, and location, with higher ratings going to pearls with fewer, less obvious blemishes. Here, I will call a blemish not a physical thing, but instead the products of our work, what we bring to the table, and what we give to the world. If we leave sponges in patients and forget to check for allergies and give the wrong drug, that can be a blemish. We want to strive for clear, high-quality medicine or products of our labor. Nacre. The thicker the nacre, the higher the value. This has to do with age, knowledge, experience, and wisdom. In our society, women start to feel invisible as they age, almost as if they lose their value. I would argue there is nothing more valuable to the world than an older, gray-haired, experienced woman who knows who she is and has a thick nacre of brilliant resilience built around her, a wealth of experience, and tons of story to tell. Color. Although in classic trade the white pearl is held valuable, I would argue that black pearls, yellow pearls, and pearls of all color are a matter of choice and region, with each holding individual value. The more variety, the better the team, the more stories to tell. Size. Larger is typically more valuable. Again, size is a reflection of the amount of time a person has had to reflect and respond to their grit, event, and build their story. Shape. Roundness and symmetry are generally most prized, but shape is different for everyone, and one shape is not for everyone. We should celebrate the shapes as they reflect a variety of ways we each individually have responded to our grit. Once you start to tell your own story, it changes over time and it matures. You find that you are not the only one telling stories about you. You find that others get to tell your story and you theirs. When I started my practice, I could have failed. One of the reasons why I think I was so successful in my early career was because I experienced mentorship, sponsorship, and allyship. The minute I walked into the door at Houston Methodist Hospital, Dr. Michael Reardon took me around and introduced me to colleagues. The story he told went something like this. Meet Shanda Blackmon. She's the future star of cardiothoracic surgery. She's well trained, she has bright and innovative ideas, she has a great work ethic, and I want you to send all of your thoracic cases to her instead of me. He told my story, and he told it well, to often, and to many. I attribute much of my success to his ability to tell a great story. People saw me the way he presented me. Perhaps he understood because he too has daughters. Mike Reardon understood the power of the story. My move to Mayo has, at times, been both good and bad. For the first time in my life, I met someone who told a very different story about me than the one told by Dr. Reardon. This person did not see me as I described myself to you, but instead presented a negative narrative about me and what I stood for. For the first time in my life, I started to realize the power of a negative story. At first, I thought this was the end of my career and I should leave Mayo. He looked for opportunity to build on his story. I couldn't see past it. I went into a deep depression. I cried in front of my children, took antidepressants, went to church, talked with my friends, got a coach, and even tried to directly meet with the person to find out why they felt this way. We cannot control what people do to us or how they treat us. We can only control how we respond to them. This was the crucial time where the story that I tell myself about who I am had to be louder in my head than the story this person told about me. Every day I had to wake up and look myself in the mirror and ask myself who I was. I had a choice every day to determine how I would behave. I did not want to give this person power over me or let this person tell people who I was. I may never know why this person decided to tell a different story or why they felt motivated to come after me. This negative storytelling can create divides, cause stress, ruin lives, and ruin careers. I had to learn to keep moving, stay true to myself, stay focused, take care of patients, and know that the constant reinforcement of my actions supporting my narrative would speak loudly on my behalf, hopefully louder than the voice of the other story someone else chose to tell about me. There were moments when I saw everything I had worked for suddenly erased by this person. I had to constantly rely on myself and my story to sustain me. And now I understand the power of the story. Now I have the privilege to tell the stories of some of my colleagues. Colleagues like Dr. Elizabeth Stevens, a woman whom I met when she was a medical student in the process of getting her MD PhD at Baylor in Houston. We quickly became friends, and I had the honor of mentoring her throughout most of her career. There were moments when people told a negative narrative about her. They said that she did not have the skills she needed to become a congenital heart surgeon. She proved them wrong by strengthening her narrative, focusing on her skills, practicing on the heart in a box, and by becoming the recipient of the Top Gun Golden Scalpel, an award given to the resident with the highest level of skills from a direct competition against her peers. Her internal narrative has taken her far. Today, she is a congenital heart surgeon we successfully recruited to Mayo Clinic, operating on baby hearts the size of a walnut, moving their vessels around and creating new valves, and doing all of it with creativity, elegance, and crazy good skills. Colleagues like Dr. Sahar Siddiqui, half Persian, half Chinese, and full-blooded badass surgeon. I got to tell her story when she graduated from surgery training, a long tradition at Mayo Department of Surgery where a resident chooses a consultant to tell the world who they are. I was honored she chose me to tell her story. I got to tell her story again to the team in Toronto, where she then went as a Mayo Scholar to learn techniques in lung transplantation, where she's brought them back to us and joined a rockstar team that has tripled the volume and quality of the lung transplant program here. She will no doubt have many more great stories to tell. I get to tell the stories of our teams, the complex operating room teams that pull our multidisciplinary cases together to do surgeries that no one else in the world can do. I tell the story of the value of our CSTs, circulating nurses, and teams that make the OR run so efficiently, allowing all of us to do 2 of these complex esophageal autotransplant surgeries in a day, where most hospitals don't even feel comfortable doing 1. I advocate for them by telling their story. After time, we see all these stories together, the teams of us, the strength we have together, the force of women that we are. We start to understand that we each have our own story, and we each have inside of us the stories we tell about each other. Collectively, these stories string together like a strand of pearls. My strong colleagues at Mayo Clinic make me proud to be a part of the multidisciplinary teams, the research teams, the education teams, and the clinical practice teams. Sometimes, oftentimes, I find I am wearing the Mayo Clinic 3-shield strand. Other times, I wear the strand of my family, telling the stories of my children, telling them my stories. This is one of the most precious strands that I own. Other times, I wear the strand of my division and the residents we train, many of whom become my partners when they graduate. We belong to societies, organizations that bring camaraderie and value, advocacy, knowledge, new skills, and science. This strand is also important to me as we try to raise the tide to bring all the boats in the bay up. Our colleagues, like the nurse practitioners and PA staff, the desk staff, the nursing floor where we work, and all the teams that we learn to be a part of, oftentimes we wear their strands and tell their stories. When I leave a patient's room, I tell a story almost every time I leave that room. Please remember to give feedback to these teams and tell them and let them know what an amazing job they do. They work so hard for you. Your story is worth telling, and the story of your experience here at Mayo Clinic is something we care about knowing. This strand is strong and reliable and is essential. Story after story, pearl after pearl, we string them together and they become strands. Oftentimes, we may wear more than one strand at a time. At once, we may wear the strand of our family, the strand of our partners in practice, the strand of our friends or professional colleagues and societies. It is with this message that I wake up every day, tell myself my story, intend to live it, tell the story of others for others, and go through each day with intention. Today, I find I am now grateful for the grit that came my way because it has allowed me to build my pearls upon it and make something beautiful from it. I may continue to tell my story, but I will especially enjoy telling the stories of those around me, bringing light into the room and enjoying the luster of their pearls. Thank you.